Joining me today is Sherry Rexroad, Chief Investment Officer of Global REITs with BlackRock. Sherry, thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning.
Can you start by telling us where BlackRock is in terms of integrating ESG data into its investment decisions?
I think like a lot of investors, BlackRock is placing more and more effort on engaging with companies about all three: environment, social, and governance. I think things are furthest along with the governance piece. There's been so much focus on that broadly. BlackRock is making an effort to incorporate more of the E and the S, and our team specifically does something where we incorporate it into the valuation process. We're not just using it as a screening tool. I think traditionally that's how a lot of E data has been used, is to cut a minimum level of environmental awareness and then you invest everything above the line. What we're trying to do is incorporate the risk into our valuation system, as well as what the potential impact to cash flows could be. And I think a lot of people in the investment community are moving in that direction, and why you're seeing such a demand for better environmental data.
Now, especially here at the Leader in the Light Working Forum, I've talked to a lot of REIT executives focused on sustainability about some of the issues that they have with reporting ESG data. From the investor standpoint, which method of ESG data do you prefer?
Well, that's the problem, is I really can't find the right data source. I think, so much of what we're provided by, whether it's index providers or others, is set in that particular vendor's template. And it really creates a huge burden for the REITs to provide the data correctly. I mean, think about it, if you had to, GRESB is really the chosen vendor for NAREIT, and that data is probably, particularly in the eyes of the REITs, most accurate. Right? They really spend a lot of time reviewing that. And so, BlackRock is investigating ways as to how we can better incorporate that data. But, we're also sent data from a number of other providers that in some cases that data is not even reviewed by the REITs. And I think it's a huge opportunity for investors and the companies to come together and try and create a more unified template for data collection. Most of all, as an investor, I don't want companies wasting resources reporting the same thing in a variety of ways, right? I would much rather have them spend the resource to actually do something in the way of environmental reaction and spend less time figuring out all the different ways to report it. So that's one of the things I think that is a goal for the group at large.
And what elements of ESG data do you and your colleagues at BlackRock think are the most important?
Well, governance is huge. And so we read every proxy for every company we're invested in. BlackRock also globally has a very sophisticated investment stewardship team. I actually sit on the advisory board for that team. And it's been very eye-opening to see how REITs compare to other types of companies. And I think on the E and the S side, we're behind the curve relative to where we are in governance. It hasn't been as much in the public spotlight. In the US, particularly relative to Europe, we're a little behind in terms of our focus there. So I do think that it's going to gain in importance, and the more that investors pay attention and demand, the companies will respond, just as they have on the governance side.
And lastly, in general, is there one area tied to ESG data and reporting where you think that REITs as a whole should really focus and work to improve?
ESG as a whole. I feel as though there have been great strides. I really think on the environmental side, it's trying to find how do you compare apples to apples. Right, every property type is different, and even within the same property types, there are a variety of ways to measure the success or failure of a company, given that, whether you're a high-rise or a low-rise, are you garden style or are you not? And so that's a huge challenge for the REITs to figure out as to how do they communicate this information to investors? How do they articulate their strategy for the environment, and how are they going to implement it and get that message across to investors?
Sherry, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.